What's up? What's up? What's up? And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about fear. We're going to be talking about how fear is a product and how that product is sold to us, bought by us, and how you'll never have happiness if you have fear. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Renaissance Room podcast. And as you can clearly hear by the way of my voice, I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited to be making this podcast. It feels very funky fresh. It feels very meditative and very much in alignment. I want to think about, first of all, I want to talk about running from your calling. And I want to talk about how, just even looking at my own life and how I've run from my calling. And how so much of it was rooted in fear. A lot of therapists would call this like catastrophizing. And I realized for myself, I was always so afraid of critique. And then I don't know what it was. You know what it was? It was prayer. It was definitely prayer. But it just was it just kind of hit me. And I just kind of looked up and I was like, I don't know y'all. I don't know the people I don't care because I don't know them. You know what I mean? And I had to sit with myself and be like, I know myself, I'm aware of who I am. And so that's really what helped me. But it took time. I think another thing too, being outside of alignment, being outside of my purpose, being outside of my calling, knowing that I was supposed to be in alignment with that, I never had happiness. You know what I mean? I never had happiness. I never had any peace. I never had the sense of solitude that really kind of comes with being sturdy and being true to yourself, I spent my whole life really, really afraid of my indifference, and as I get older and I see everyone's the same and everyone's trying to be the same, I'm so grateful that God kept me different, and it took time to get there. And that's one of the things that I really try to pour into my girls is loving themselves. As you guys know, I'm a nonprofit founder, but loving themselves and loving their indifference. Growing up, being into English and academia and all those things, it was never really a popular thing. It was never a cool thing, right? You were considered a nerd. And you look at that and you're like, oh my God, that was so young, that was so long ago, et cetera, et cetera. But those things actually do have an effect on you as you get older and you start to feel like you're not cool. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people who were in that space kind of go outside of that space to fit in with other people and just really lose themselves along the way. I mean, these people are completely washed. And so I do give myself credit. I do think that there is definitely this sense of gratitude that I have because I stayed on the path, even though it wasn't easy. And that's kind of what we have today. You see it a lot of times in a lot of Christian content. I'll be following a lot of the Christian content creators or whatever, or they just be popping up on my Explore page. But I be seeing how they talk about things I don't drink, I don't smoke, so I don't really have a lot of friends. And that's just the world, right? That's literally the world today. If you're not into certain things, then that's kind of what it is. And when we talk about the world, I think we can kind of look at it from that kind of youth adolescence kind of lens, which is referring back to being in high school and not being popular. Because as you get older, you just kind of realize that there are a lot of people who are on social media who are young, who are kind of growing up collectively. And then that's kind of being enmeshed with older people who may not have had those experiences. I don't think people realize it, but there really is something said about when you're young and you have kids, right? Or when you're not ready to have kids and you become a teenage mom or whatever the case may be. Or let's say you go off and you go to college and you take the collegiate route. And so you're in school consistently, right? You went to get your bachelor's, your master's, your doctorates, and then whatever else comes after that. You're in certification programs and residencies and fellowships and all these different things. How for so many people, these very narrow paths limit their ability to grow and in certain ways, you know what I mean? There's kind of this stifling almost because it's you kind of just have to sacrifice so much to really kind of be on that path. And I've seen that in a lot of people, but what it does, it kind of keeps you away from developing the skills that you may need to interact with others from a social standpoint and so forth. And of course, for some people, it works to their benefit. Let's take, for example, the idea of a high value man, which this concept is very funny. I kind of broke this down in my column today, which I will leave in the link below. Okay, I'll leave it in the bio. So you guys check out my column. follow the column. Actually, just follow the column. This is the call of action. Follow the column. But I just kind of talked about how I was so over the idea of a high value man. I was on YouTube this morning and I was seeing someone talking about this in the comment section. I love the comment section. And it was just really good. And I just thought about like how the idea of like a high value person, and it's really based on externals, and how a lot of times these people are not good people. And you kind of start to understand why a lot of times if you're a beautiful woman or if you're a handsome man, there's a lot of negative stereotypes centering that, because you just kind of realize that the reality is that like there are a lot of people who get specific praise and acknowledgement for having these external accolades. And when you're in this 1% kind of like category, you're self-absorbed and you absolutely feel as though, yes, I deserve to be treated like something better because I have done the work to attain these things. So I deserve, preferential treatment. Like I deserve to be treated differently than everybody else because I've done the work, essentially. It's kind of like there's this trade-off for external success that is then, okay, you deserve to be treated like a different type of person. And that's why we have the conversations around, modern relationships being about money. And we have the conversations around, a lot of people are, trying to buy love because love is no longer seen as this thing that is free. It's no longer this free act. It's merely like you can buy it in the exchange of something. And so I was just talking about these high value men and just how I was even over it for myself. And I was seeing some people in the comments on this particular video who were in agreement with me. And I thought that was so good because I just think it's one of those things to where it's like, you just realize just how dumb this really is. And it's just, I don't know, man, it's crazy. Like just kind of seeing the world and how people have become so thirsty for social validation and like social, you know what I mean? Like it's become crazy. And I remember sitting in my journalism class, I'll never forget this. And my professor told me like, oh, well, if you want to do this, if you want to do that, you want to have these type of, career goals and so forth, you're not going to be able to talk about certain things. And I realized with so many people who kind of take these kind of like lofty positions, how the exchange is you. And so it makes me think about culture today and just how we make so many decisions without weighing the cost. I think in a vast array of options that are given to us, I think just in the construct of America that is greed, we don't really consider the cost of the trade-offs and the choices that we make. And I think because everything is so instantaneous, we definitely cannot calculate long-term consequences. You know what I mean? Like we're so short-sighted that we can't see long-term. You know what I mean? And it's just heartbreaking to see so many people make decisions like within this short span and how it costs them their lives. I started thinking about death and the fear of death and all these different things, and how so much of this or not having the fear of death as the opposite, or just kind of being in a space in your life where it's like you just take life for granted. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of us really take life for granted because it's like you don't really know what's on the other side of that. And so you just have a lot of people who just live so carelessly, you know what I mean? So aimlessly. And it's not to say that you need to go out and like do X, Y, and Z, but it is something about like walking in your purpose and really answering the call. Like I said, for myself, I could never really run away from it. I'm going to be honest, I didn't want it. I didn't, because honestly, it felt very heavy. It felt like, at the time, I just felt like I couldn't handle criticism. I could not stand the judgment, all these different things. And it just really took me really relying on God. It took me to really like be intentional with my prayers and be intentional about like just kind of staying true to myself and like really working towards loving myself. Because like I said, when you grow up with that type of indifference and you're kind of sheltered and like bullied in this sense, like it really kind of stays with you a little bit until you kind of like address that and acknowledge that. So yeah, man, like I definitely tell people who are different, like be you. And that's the most beautiful thing. It's like you're yourself and you're real and you're authentic. Like, and a lot of times when you real, like you're going to meet a lot of people who don't want to be around you. You know what I mean? Because they're not real. And like your authenticity is bothering them. And like I hate to really kind of come off like I'm sounding like one of these, like, you know what I mean? You have so many people creating content around this that's just breeding like narcissism in some people. But No, like that's a real thing. Like when you're real, when you doing you, like there's some people who do not want to be around you, like, cause they not real, and that's bothering them because they don't know how to get back to, they may have never even had a them. You know what I mean? They don't know how to get back to that. And the truth is that you got to look at your whole life and you got to be real with yourself about what it is that you like. I think one of the things that I've always kind of noticed, especially today, is like when you like something different, like when you're not the type, and we've seen this kind of like in the whole like natural versus makeup girl war, right? It was like women were saying things like, we're really trying to tear each other down on the opposite side of the fence. And it's like, that's kind of what happens when you become authentic and you live in your truth and you just a person who even speaks truth. You know what I mean? Like, it's always going to be that divide in a sense. And like, people are going to have a problem with that because it's not popular. It's not common. And you may feel insecure because you're on the other side of the fence and it's just you and you're standing alone. And they were, like I said, for myself, just I think coming from a very like, I don't want to say humility, but like a very humble standpoint, I never really wanted to be the type of person to be like, believe in what people say, things like, oh, people hating on you or whatever. Like, I don't know. But I just can definitely say, like, if you're someone and you like different things, like say your thing is forensics or say your thing is, like rocks and architecture or whatever the case may be, like be you and do you. I know for me growing up, I did take the collegiate route. Like I was in school for 6 years. At this point, I always say my degree is absolutely earned. I absolutely earned it. Coming up on my last year, junior year, it was just all these complications. Like it just became this very much closed door. And it was very apparent to me that God was like, this is not what I have for you. Because no matter what I did, I was working hard. And it was like God was just not opening that door for me. So it was very clear that, God had other plans for me. But yeah, like when I really sit back and I just kind of look at the entirety of it, it's interesting, And so I would definitely say, like, for me, I didn't have those type of people that I can connect with. I always wanted to just kind of be around other Black intellects because I just felt like there's something about the immersion of African American history coupled with like realism and experience and intelligence that just it just does it for me. But those are things that's not like popular. Like, to be honest, in our community, unfortunately, we value other things. And I think the reason why we don't really have certain values in place is because, first of all, we're treated like second class citizens. And even when we make it to a certain space, even if you're dressing politically correct and so forth, you're always going to feel that way because people see you that way. And that's the real thing. Like, that's the projection. That's the racial reality, you know what I mean, of being Black in America. And that's the experience. And, I'll never forget, I was on TikTok. There was this young Black girl. She was like alternate or whatever you want to call it. Young. I look at it like a phase. I think every Black kid has phases. I think every teenager has phases. And one of the things that I'm reading in, her book, her name is Kristen Henning. I told you guys about this, The Age of Innocence. And she just kind of talks about how when it comes to Black adolescents, Black kids are not afforded the same opportunities of exploration as young white kids. And so this young girl's on TikTok. She's saying how she hates being Black because she doesn't like being treated this way or looked at this way, and how Black kids are bullying her and so forth. And I think it's unfortunate because I think what you have in a stage in society where it's like a lot of people are leaning towards whiteness and anti-Blackness is becoming a huge thing because, to be Black is not profitable, but cultural appropriation is, right? And so you have kind of like history repeating itself in this way, and you don't really have the education, which is, about race and history and all these different things. And so you have a lot of young Black kids who aren't really following this mainstream idea of like the quote unquote city girl or whatever the case may be. And they're struggling with self-hate. And so it's interesting, just to kind of see this all play out. And, for me, I was very grateful because growing up in high school, I had my friends and we were very much unique and we were true to ourselves. And like, we just did us, regardless of what was popular, regardless of what was cool. And so it's just unfortunate to see a lot of kids don't really have a haven, and it's unfortunate that, a lot of times in our communities, because of the deprivation, because of the lack of opportunities, because of the lack of socioeconomic provision and resources just in general, we don't really have the opportunity to kind of like put other things above status and wealth and money, right? Because it's the one thing that we have been deprived of, which is the economic opportunity. And so a lot of times when you're in these communities and you're looking for things like education and certain things, you're going to come across, especially now, right? Especially now, as we clearly see that like Black people are not getting these opportunities. These opportunities have completely skipped over us post-pandemic, and they're going right into the arms of immigrants and, people who identify with other racial groups and ethnicities in the name of minorities, right? And so it's just a very interesting thing, like just to kind of see it all come together. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, as a young Black kid, if you don't have this type of understanding, then it's going to be really hard for you to kind of like stay afloat, and know what's going on in the world and be in tune with yourself. It's going to be very easy to lean towards the stereotypes of like the criminalization, because it's like you don't really know, So I don't know. I guess my overall purpose in this whole entire podcast episode was to answer the calling for your life. I would definitely say if you're a young person and you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do, I'm always going to come from the standpoint of like educating yourself on who you are, finding a sense of pride for your Blackness. I think that'll be a really good place to start, especially in a world where it's becoming so capitalized. And, unfortunately, the media has always had a very unique way of exploiting those who are Black and ignorant, and may not be aware or knowledgeable in regards to who they are and in the world and so forth. And so they take our young women who, come from very like deplorable conditions and, toxic families and so forth. And then they put them on the pedestal. They'll give them a TV show and allow them to be the spokesperson for the entire community. And so if you can start by having a sense of pride for your Blackness, when you show up, you can inspire something in somebody else. You can inspire just change, and you can stand tall and actually feel a sense of meaning in your life. I would definitely say that it's unfortunate because, there used to be a time where if you were a young teenager, early 20s and so forth, there was this grace that was given for exploration, but unfortunately the times have shifted so much, right? By the time you're like 20, you no longer really have the opportunity to kind of remain in that youth-like state. You have a lot of people saying things like, oh, when I was 20, I was just backpacking across America. Or when I was 20, I was going to these concerts. I was living life. I was having fun. We don't really have that opportunity anymore. Life gets very serious. The world is ever changed because of that. On top of the exposure, right? You having young kids having conversations, like second graders, having conversations, being exposed to certain things on YouTube that shouldn't even be a conversation for this age range. You know what I mean? And so it just, life gets so real for young kids so quick. And I think that's probably one of the saddest things because, these are very fundamental stages in a person's personal development. Like you need adolescence, you need, you need the exploration, you need the self-discovery, you need the seasons of rebellion to where you can find your own voice and push back on social norms and even to your parents, Like it's just a phase. It's a phase, and it's like you need that phase. And so seeing a lot of young kids be stripped of that is like extremely heartbreaking because it's like, you're going to have a lot of people who aren't going to be fully developed in the world. And we've seen that, right? With a lot of older generations, a lot of people who have not been raised. And so you couple that with criminality, it just gets out of control. So this message is for the leaders, answer the call on your life, answer the call and really, really like work to find a solid place within yourself to understand that like nobody can define you, but you. And realize that like when it comes to the internet, these are people that don't know you. So who cares? You know you. Like that's all that really matters. And I think the moment that you start to garner any type of like recognition or notoriety, be mindful, like because at the end of the day, it comes at a cost. And for a lot of people, that cost is the silencing. That cost is I'm going to stay in this one space and talk about this one particular thing for the rest of my life because it's not because it's a calling, not because it's a purpose, but because I can't say anything outside of this little box here. See, that's what money does sometimes. Like it's kind of like a power struggle type of thing. You know what I mean? Like somebody, you know what I mean? Like it's a very tricky thing. So be mindful with that. Be mindful of your desire for status and fame. Be mindful of, knowing who you are, and don't let nobody make you feel like you're overlooked or you're nobody. We all go through humbling seasons. We all go through crushing seasons, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's like, you'll look up and you'll be so grateful that it's just you and God. You'll be so grateful that it's just you and you. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, like, it's something that's just like indescribable about being sturdy within yourself and standing 10 toes and knowing that you're doing the right thing, knowing that you're telling the truth and you're not out here just, like for the sake of anybody, really. Like there's sincerely something so fulfilling about that. Just being authentic and being true to yourself. Like, that's beautiful. So don't sell yourself short. Answer the calling for your life. You're really only going to have happiness if you can get on the other side of fear. If you can get on the other side of like being afraid of what people are going to think. Like, we live in a world today where everybody's so fake. Everybody's so fake. Like, I just wrote a piece talking about something in particular. You got to check it out. The link in the bio. And I just was thinking to myself, like, people are literally so fake. Like, people will come at you and be like, oh, why you saying this? Why you saying that? Why you saying this? As if they cared about the person. You know what I mean? Like, people are just so fake today. Like, people, it's all about like ruffling the feathers and trying to get online and be a good person. Like I wrote this piece, it's a short story, but it was real story. And, I just wrote about like situations that happened to me at work. And I can't tell you how many times I recently was sitting with myself and I was thinking about, my own personal racial trauma and uncovering that and like working through that, and how I was really dealing with a lot of imposter syndrome. I'll never forget, like, even from as early as I can remember, you know what I mean? Like, I've had some pretty traumatic racial experiences, especially in terms of education and my own personal abilities due to, white teachers and people in place. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so just working to really overcome that and unlearn a lot of that. But like, it can definitely put you in that space. It was just recently had a white coworker come to me talking mad crazy. So to me, it's like these conversations are so slippery slope. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like a lot of times people just kind of want to brush over it. And it's like, it's not really until it happens to you, that you kind of start to see. But I know for a fact there's a lot of Black people who may be struggling with that because of the racial trauma. And even from an ancestral standpoint, seeing Black men, Black women who are successful being lynched, being hung, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. But you got to have faith in God. You know what I mean? You have to be strong within yourself and what you believe in, your convictions, and you have to know that you're protected. You have to know that you're going to be fine. If God is calling you to do something, he's going to provide for you. And, you got to know that the angels will surround you. You know what I mean? God is sending his angels after you. And you got to know that, like, death is inevitable. When our time is up, our time is up. But it's like, it's going to feel a lot better, I know, to have God say, well done, faithful servant, than to just show up and be empty handed. And it's like, you've been on this earth this whole time. And you're not saying that you got to make this huge impact. No, I'm just talking about your four corners. Because I think at this point, people talk about Black liberation and all these things and community and so forth. I think it's about your four corners. What did you do with your time here? I'm not talking about, you know what I mean? Because I don't really think it's about that anymore. I think that so much of the work within our community specifically is about individualism. I really do. I'm not really sure if it's a collective effort anymore, because I just think that, man, so many people have gone astray. And I can't blame them, you know what I mean? But I think that it's about your four corners. What did you do with the information that you've learned? You know what I mean? Who did you help inspire? Like, what did you do with your time here? You know what I mean? So I think it's something fulfilling in that. And I think that that's kind of where you should come from my personal standpoint, to live a whole life and not really make an impact and just kind of just live and be here. It's like you can never really question why you're miserable. You can never really question why your life is the way it is, because it's like, what did you give? What did you do for anybody else? Like, what did you know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. And I think another thing too with social media is understanding everybody has such a unique background experience. You've got some Blacks who have grew up in suburbia their whole lives, which is nothing wrong with that. I'm not shunning it. I grew up in suburbia, but I was, a little bit more well-rounded. I went to quite a few different schools, lived in quite a few different neighborhoods, but that was my stomping ground. You know what I mean? And I more so just say that to say, like, I think as you get older, just be you. And I think that's what really makes a good role model, you know, because I think as you get older, sometimes you're still looking for like role models and you're still looking for people to kind of like paint that picture for you. But you got to get to a point in your life where you got to realize like, okay, I'm grown now. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to be the role model. I'm going to be, you know what I mean? Like I'm going to move forward with my life and I'm going to live it in such a way. And I'm not going to look to people because people are just people at the end of the day. And people are going to come from their own experiences. People are going to come from the things that they've learned, the things that they've read, the things that they've seen. And that's what it's going to be, you know? So it's like you can no longer really look to other people to kind of be your guiding light. You know, you have to get that from God. You know what I mean? And if you don't know, then take some time to be still. Take some time to just like stop all things and just like pray, you know, and God will guide you. And I know one thing too, because I'm going to end with this. If God's not providing, then it's probably not for you. It's probably not for you. Like there's something said about, like I said, the imposter syndrome, you know, uprooting imposter syndrome. They were saying that it's pretty much one of those things to where you don't feel like you don't gravitate towards the things that are easy for you. You much rather like struggle in certain things. You feel like the things that are too easy are just like X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? Like you have a hard time receiving that. And so it's important to know that like if God is giving you a gift and a calling and a purpose, it may be hard to somebody else, but it may come natural to you. And that's probably what you should be doing, you know? So like learn how to walk in that. You know, learn how to own that. And I know a lot of people like struggling, trying to get certain businesses off the ground because it sounds good in theory, you know, struggle and do all these things. Like it sounds good in theory. But, you know, I told my friend, I said, you know, suffering is for a season. It's not a lifetime. You know, God says long suffering. Yeah, we're going to suffer on this earth. It's going to be trouble. You know what I mean? But it's not a lifestyle. And so it's important to know that as well. And I think, you know, if you can just kind of get to this point in your life where it's like you just realize like sometimes like God really will give you grace, you know, and he'll give you grace to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. But just know like if God ain't providing, then it's probably not for you. It's easy to look at other people's lives and be like, oh, I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to pursue that. They're doing it. I can do it. And it's another thing too, like when you're on your path of discovery, like you're trying a bunch of different things. But yeah, just know that like if God's not providing, 9 times out of 10, it's not what he has for you. Like go where your resources are. Go where God, you know what I mean? And also know within yourself that if you're pursuing something, you're not really wanting to put the work in, double check yourself. Ask yourself, hey, is this something that I want? Like, and don't be real with yourself. Now look at the actions you've took. If you ain't took no action towards it, that's probably not something you want to do. And that's okay. That's okay. That is absolutely okay. You know what I mean? You don't always got to be a celebrity. You don't always got to be rich to make an impact. Peace.